Welcome to the Soul Seeker podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kabert. I started this pod back in 2019 when I was taking my first steps on the path of remembering. And at the time, the tagline for the show was a journey of self-discovery. A year later, it became a journey of remembering. Yet, what I know now is back then, I was still seeking. And what I've come to know now is that it's the journey of seeking that brings us the silent, slow stillness of acceptance. And therein lies our own innate wisdom. It's my mission now to eradicate the glorification of hustle culture, as it was my drive in entrepreneurship that led to a greater whole, and that's because I was outsourcing my sovereignty rather than looking within. So let this be your invitation to take a deep breath in and remember that at any time we can shift our thoughts and our feelings to create the outer world in which we wish to live. Soul Seekers, it's time to grow. Let's go. What is up, and welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seeker podcast. I am your host, as always, Sam Kabert, and I am really stoked to introduce you guys to my good friend, Wes Woodson. Wes is such an amazing human being. His energy is what am I trying to say here? His energy is contagious, and I love his enthusiasm. He's a fellow mental health educator and public speaker. I met him on the speaking circuit, and he's doing amazing work, just dedicating his life to helping Gen Z students to feel seen, heard, and supported. He's reached over 10,000 students with his speeches, and he specializes with storytelling, humor, and transforming how schools approach mental wellness. So in this specific episode of the Soul Seeker podcast, we're really addressing the student demographic. So whether you have a son, a daughter, a nephew, a niece, a cousin, or you are a student, this one is going to be super eye-opening because it's not really just about students. It's about how can we feel safe enough to lean in to actually feel somatically in the body what's coming up so that we can move through it. So if you're into that, make sure you listen to the full episode. You will dig this one with Wes Woodson, and definitely check out his book. I highly recommend it. It's called I Have Anxiety. If you're new to me, the best way you can give back to the show is by just leaving a 5-star review. My mission of the Soul Seeker podcast for the past 6 years has been to raise the collective consciousness from its fallen state. So if you're down with that mission, the easiest way to get back to the show is just leave a 5-star review. And if you want to go deeper with me, the best way to do so is by joining the free Breath Club. That's where I guide breathwork sessions for free every single week, and you have an online community to support you for things that come up in real time. You can find the link to join the Breath Club in the show notes. Now, enjoy this episode with my dude, Wes Woodson. What is up? And here we are again for another Soul Seeker podcast with my homie, Wes Woodson. And just like always, we're going to drop in with just a few breaths. So Wes, for you, for me, for everyone listening, maybe you're not in a place where you can close your eyes. Always be safe and mindful of that, but you can always breathe with us. So if you are in a place where you can start to close down the eyes, Wes, for you and for myself and for those of you listening, I invite you to do so, sitting straight up. And just beginning to deepen the breath through the nose, inhaling all the way up. Sipping in a bit more air at the top. And sighing it out. Another like that. Inhaling through the nose, letting the belly expand and bringing that breath all the way up. Sip in a bit more. And a big sigh, let it go, let it go, let it go. And one final breath all the way up. Sipping in a bit more air at the top. Hold the breath, just gently rolling up the eyes. And sighing it out, let it go, let it go, let it go. Flickering the eyes back open, letting the breath return to its natural state, nothing wild, just 3 breaths, and here we are. My man, Wes Woodson, what is up? Nice to see you and have you on the Soul Seeker podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, my man. I really need those three reps because I was playing basketball yesterday and my body is very much sore. So that was very helpful to come back to a very relaxing state.
Ah, nice. Yeah, awesome. Well, I love the work that you do. I know you just mentioned before we hit record, you love the work that I do. And we hit off at this conference for college speakers and basically got to know each other out there in wherever that was, somewhere near Chicago, Lincolnshire, Illinois, and then again in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And here we are now on the Soul Seeker podcast. So for people that aren't familiar with your work, can you just give us an overview of what you're about and how you go about it?
Yeah, great. So I'm Wes Woodson. I am the founder and chief storyteller of the Wes Woodson Company. So we are a mental health education company that helps schools humanize mental health through engaging and relatable keynote presentations. And so for me, I started off as a 22-year-old college student who had the biggest panic attack of his life. I was hospitalized for having some suicidal thoughts. And I was learning all of these things that I wish I learned in school, such as coping skills, meditation, mindfulness, breath work, as I now have known it through Sam. But today I'm really on the mission to help inspire more students to not face suicide or not really attempt suicide, but more so try to understand how to become more literate about their feelings and emotions and navigate all of that with confidence. And I've been doing this for the last 2.5 years and I love it. And we met at that wonderful conference and I meet wonderful people like you and our other friends that we have too on the speaking circuit. And I just love every single day of doing this. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm grateful to even be here to share a bit about my story.
Yeah, it must be so surreal, like looking back at 22 years old, being hospitalized with suicidal ideation, going through like severe panic attacks, really learning what it means to be with anxiety and the different emotions and feelings coming up to now being on tour. Like, I mean, when you go on tour to these different colleges, you have what, like 20 stops or so?
Yeah. So in the first quarter, it's been about 30 presentations, 30 different shows. And then there's small breaks in between. But then my next leg, I think for the whole year, we're going to cross about 50 schools met. So it's a lot. It definitely is a lot. So I have to really use my toolkit that I've learned over the years. It's not easy, right? I have my days where I go on stage and I teach students how to understand their emotions instead of trying to react to them in a negative way. And I use my own personal story to kind of get through that, what I call the shame wall. So the shame wall is that place that we kind of hide behind where we believe the lie that shame tells us. And that lie is it's only happening to you. So for me, when it came to anxiety and depression, I was behind that shame wall. And that shame wall was telling me that no other person who looks like me, who talks like me, is having the same struggles as I'm having. So I kept everything behind a mask. So whenever I go on these stages and I share my story with these students, they are so like engaged and they're like, they want to come up to me and share their story. It's a lot to carry sometimes. So I have to really use my toolkit that I have now to almost distance myself. And I'm still learning. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm still learning about how to really do that. But to your point, man, it's definitely a lot.
Yeah, energetic hygiene is such an important thing. Like just for me last week, I was holding so much space, and just having a conversation with a buddy yesterday, just working with some medicine, and just being like, man, now it's been a lot of space to hold, you know. Anyways, though, yeah, I get all that. The shame wall is such a great concept, and how are like college students specifically, like what is the mental health of the current student population in college right now, because a lot of these students were affected by the lockdowns in pivotal years in their life, like junior high school time, you know?
Yeah, you're great point. Right now, you started off, to your point, in my class. I graduated 2020, so
Oh,
when
wow. Yeah.
it was my senior spring, where the pandemic first started. So you see how a lot of my friends, my former classmates, they had a lot of their job offers rescinded. So they had, let's say they had a secure job all lined up after college. Boom, they got wiped away. I mentioned that because that was a lot of the challenges that probably freshmen and sophomores who were in college, they were kind of wondering, what is the world going to look like? in a post-pandemic world. Now what I'm seeing, the mental health shifts are less, I wouldn't say less, but not just about high parental expectations. Some people are the first to go in their family to go off to college. Others are maybe the second or third. They probably have big shoes to fill. We've already seen students have the pressure. The other thing I'm seeing on the mental health side, though, is given the current political landscape, we don't have to go into depth about it, but right now a lot of students are in fear about specific programs that are being wiped off campus. And now it's like, well, how can I even study here if this place doesn't feel like a place that supports my identity and who I am as a person? And that is probably the number one thing I've heard in the last, dare I say, 5 months of being on the road. Because for me, I feel like these students are coming to my presentations, they're coming to my events, and they're saying, how can I even hold space for myself here if there's no safe space for me here at all? And that's where I kind of speak to of like, I can't offer any quick one-time solution. I have to hold space for that and acknowledge that it freaking sucks right now. And there's nothing that I can really say or necessarily do that will take that pain away. So that's what I'm seeing on the mental health side, is a lot of anxiety around not feeling safe on campus due to the current political landscape.
Yeah, and the name of your book, which I listened to on Audible, and I highly recommend for people. The name of the book is "I Have Anxiety." Subtitle: "So What?" I love it so much, and highly recommend you guys check it out. Specifically on Audible, because Wes, you don't have a background as like an actor or anything like that, do you?
No, man. I did a little bit in high school, but that's about it.
Okay, a little bit. Yeah. Because Wes is acting out the different like voices in his head. Kind of reminds me of Parts Work, IFS, Internal Family Systems, and also the movie Inside Out. And it's just so entertaining, educational, great resource. I Have Anxiety, So What? Highly recommend it. But the reason why I bring that up is because you're mentioning that a lot of these students are experiencing a lot of anxiety. So what are some of your practices that work for you that you share with others?
Yeah, great question. I'm so glad you found that part of the book entertaining, because like when I was recording it, the audio engineer who was like helping me produce the book, he was saying like, oh, like what if you actually kind of acted out the different voices? I'll be more entertaining. So I'm glad you liked that, because that was his idea. But anyway, some of the tips I give to students, right, is to release control, and that might sound counterintuitive, but when in the subtitle, it's the unapologetic guide to owning your anxiety. And I didn't say control, right? And ownership really comes from the ability to become what I call objective observers of your anxiety. So the reason why it's called I Have Anxiety instead of I Am Anxiety is I'm not over identifying with my anxiety. I'm more so preaching the ability to step outside your anxiety and observe, okay, for one, acknowledge it. It's okay to acknowledge it. You don't have to necessarily make it feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a bad person for having anxiety. Acknowledge it with compassion. Reflect about it. Where are you feeling the angst, right? I always ask the student, because a therapist asked this for me, do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your face? I tend to feel it in my face. I tend to feel it in my hands sometimes. They get kind of clammy and sweaty. And then T, the last part, how can you take action to give yourself what you need? Many times before I learned all of these things in the program, many times I would just go like this. This was my response to my anxiety. I'd feel anxious. I would hate the feeling. I would hate myself for even having the feeling. There was no sense of compassion. So because I hated myself, and I'm coming from a place of hate, there was no sense of tools like mindfulness. There was no sense of tools like going for a nature walk or doing like what I call a 5 senses countdown. It was just more so, I don't like myself. Let me just stop this feeling. Well, as you and I both know, Sam, what you resist persists. So the more I was like resisting my anxiety, it would just get more and more and more powerful, and I was getting more and more anxious. And it was almost this like repetitive cycle. So now what I teach students is how do I walk them through what I call the ART framework? A for acknowledgement, R for reflection, T for taking action. On the acknowledgement side, maybe it's doing a 5 senses countdown. So it's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can actually like maybe like smell, and then what's 1 thing you taste. And Something like that really does help people come back to the present moment. It's not a cure, but it's more so you're helping your brain come off from being in alert mode to really coming back to the present moment. Or it's doing something like I call 575, a deep breathing exercise, right? Breath work is amazing for this. On the R side, reflecting, I mean, we can do journaling, we can go see a therapist to help get a bird's eye view of your problem. But the take action side, my favorite, you have to learn how to give yourself that figurative hug. Because what you need when you are anxious, depressed, you're looking for some level of connection. So how can you either change the state of your body, whether it's going into some like doing cold showers. I did that myself. I do that too. Also, some people do like going out, hang out with friends. I myself do like that when I need to feel connected and not alone in my anxiety. I'll call my fiance and we'll do something like play a game together, go for a walk together. We went for a jog together last week. That was amazing. It helped with my stress that I was doing at the time. But doing those things that kind of hug that metaphorical, that figurative inner child that you have. So all those things, that's what I really do help students understand how to do on a day-to-day level.
I love it. You brought up inner child there at the end, which I probably will circle back on that.
Yeah.
So with college students specifically, like we both do similar work for similar type people, maybe a little bit different in age demographics. But one of the things that's a common through line in this work is victim mentality and victim consciousness. And it's really like excuse based and like, oh, this doesn't work for whatever reason. And I'm curious if you see quite a bit of like poor me type mentality in your work when you're interacting with the college demographic.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I relate to it so much. The one thing that really triggered my suicide ideation was I was a survivor of domestic violence. I was in a toxic abusive relationship. My partner had assaulted me. And when the police got involved and she got arrested, the first thought that came to my mind was, it's my fault, right? The second thought that came to my mind was 9 times out of 10, it's the other way, right? 9 times out of 10, typically it's the male who is the person who is the aggressor, and then the female is the victim. And I'll never forget it. The police officer slid this form to me that would sign basically me acknowledging what he was telling me, which was you become a victim of domestic violence. And I carried that sentence, you are a victim of domestic violence, all the way into that night where I thought about taking my own life. But when I got to the hospital program is designed to stabilize you. So I'm in the hospital program and they gave us this like piece of paper that is like this triangle. And it's the triangle showed at the top of it, it's like your current state. And the 2 branches on the side were either victim or survivor. So how do you move from a place of victimhood to survivorship? And me talking about being before I was a victim of domestic violence, I don't really use that word anymore. Now I say I'm a survivor of domestic violence. So what I'm seeing is that transformation. Words are everything. So what you say does matter. I'm seeing students maybe feel stuck. I would rather say stuck than be victim, because they don't really know how to transform to the other side of being a survivor. That's why I say things of like, I don't consider myself an anxious person. I'm someone who happens to be experiencing anxiety. Or I say things like, I intentionally use my verbiage to outline and show students that be careful of the words you say, because what you say, you believe as truth. So instead of me saying I am a victim of domestic violence, I say I'm a survivor of domestic violence. That's more empowering. So I really do believe it's because why students might stay stuck in victimhood mentality is because they don't have the tools to understand survivorship. And I think that's what we have to teach more students. How do we equip them with the tools to step into survivorship as opposed to staying stuck in victimization?
Yeah, I agree so much. And thank you for sharing all that. Like the college years, I was just having this conversation with a friend, like the college years are so formidable and it's such a profound time in our life. And I don't know that much right now about like, is it worth it to have a college education or not? That's not like really my thing, but I do know enough to be like, I'm 36, right? It's very different than when I was in college. And I think it was starting to change when I was in college. Like I'm talking about typical majors where you don't really know what you want to do, not like a niche thing, becoming a doctor, a lawyer, attorney, whatever it'd be. But what was most profound in my development in my college years was going through the hardships, being away from my family, like all the things. And I experienced a couple traumatic experiences. One of them being having a friend hang himself in the other room when a bunch of us were in the living room, and being there for the whole thing. And just a couple other things like that. That was the big one, though. And it's those experiences that, of course, we would never wish that upon anyone, to take their own life or to be around that, having said that, there's so much growth in those big experiences. And I know what I found in my life is like, it's harder for me personally to show up and do the work. And what I mean do the work is all of the mental, emotional health stuff that we're talking about, like leaning into our feelings and moving to survivorship. It's harder for me to do that when things are going okay. When it's like that anxiety where I'm feeling anxiety because I feel anxiety, I feel stress like anyone else. But when I'm going through a major crisis, right? That's actually, it may seem counterintuitive to some, but that's actually for me personally where it's a lot easier, because I adopt like a game time mentality, being like, okay, if I'm learning about the tools and all this other type of stuff, now's when I need it most and when I need to apply it. So I guess I bring this all up to say, like, with college just being such a interesting time in one's life, if someone isn't necessarily going through major hardship and it's just like, the transition and typical stuff, but it's not something that's right in front of their face, it can be hard to get that motivation to really show up for yourself,
Yeah, man. And thank you for sharing that too with me. I'm really sorry you experienced that in college. Like, that is not something that anyone should experience. Never. I feel for the young person that lost their life to suicide in that college room. On the other side of what you're saying, I actually relate a lot to what you said. Yes, I get it. It sounds counterintuitive when we could have the motivation when it's chaotic, but then when it's not chaotic, we're like, what for what? Like, why would we even want to? Sometimes even we create chaos out of comfort because we're used to comfort. We're used to chaos. I can relate to that.
True.
I've definitely I can relate to that, man. I definitely had a chaotic household growing up. So whenever I would experience stability, maybe some might call it self-sabotage, some might call it just not being able to sit still or being able to allow peace. But I was one of those students or young people who would just kind of create chaos because I was used to chaos, not used to stability. So there's that. On the other side, I really think that students who feel like they have to wait till something's wrong to get help, that's something we have to now change the narrative around. You don't have to wait until your car is having all 4 flat tires or all the lights on your front dashboard are going off like a Christmas tree. You don't have to wait for them to go to get your car oil changed. Some people do the proactive approach. They take their car in monthly, maybe even bi-weekly, to get a system checkup. And maybe that's a little bit extreme, but the point still stands true that, like, you can take a proactive approach to your mental health by seeing a therapist. It's not bad to see a therapist, even if nothing is quote unquote majorly wrong with you.
Have you ever felt overwhelmed by emotions and unsure how to move through them? Sam created the Breath Club to help you find calm and clarity. In this free online community, Sam teaches how to regulate your nervous system through breathwork and process emotions effectively. Did you know that most emotions only last 90 seconds when you fully allow yourself to feel them? This is called the 90-second rule, and it's a powerful tool backed by science for emotional healing. Each week, Sam hosts live calls to guide breathwork practices and create real connection. You'll also get access to an online course and pre-recorded breathwork videos. The link to join is in the show notes.
I think we have to move from a place of saying, how can we make this more of a human experience as opposed to a clinical destination? What I mean by that is we wait for something to go wrong, or we need a diagnosis for them to take some level of action, as opposed to being like, no, doing these things make you a more self-aware individual. And if I think back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first few bases are being like, say, personal safety, food, water, shelter, belonging. The top one is self-actualization. So if we want to achieve or experience self-actualization, these things such as mindfulness, going to see a therapist, learning coping skills, becoming more literate about our emotions and our feelings, those things help us get there, which I believe is the goal of every human experience. So that's my hope. My hope is to normalize the conversation so much where it becomes less of a clinical conversation and more about a human experience.
Yeah, I love the idea of normalizing the conversation. We'll get into that as well. Just a few notes there. So seeing a therapist and normalizing that, yeah, absolutely. And, for me, the traditional like talk therapy never really resonated, and it still doesn't per se. I think there's a lot of other modalities. That said, if talk therapy is working for you, that's great. Or if it's one of the things, you mentioned where are you feeling it in your body earlier, like with anxiety, somatic experiencing, meaning like feeling it in your body and reconnecting, because so many of us are disassociate, has been the most profound thing for me, and from what I'm seeing from many others that are actually having breakthroughs, as opposed to just the band-aids. Because with talk therapy has like a place in this, for like reflections and mirrors, and like what I hear you saying is helping to process things like that. But I really feel like the traditional talk therapy is just like such a band-aid, and just like just holding space for someone to let it out. And I actually have a lot of clients who love this practice. Instead of journaling, what they do is they do voice memos, and then they'll go back and listen to them later. And that's obviously a great way to journal if you prefer not to like take pen to paper. But also what's great is like, we just want to speak and we want to be heard. And most of the time that we're speaking, it doesn't even really matter if someone says something back. And typically if they do say something back, it can make it worse, because if they're saying something back and it wasn't interpreted the way you thought you wanted it to be received, then that intensifies it. Whereas if you're doing a voice memo, then you still have that energetic, let's call it purge, of getting it out of your system, and you don't have to worry about like how that's going to be received by another.
Yeah, man, I love that. And there's a few things I wanted to respond about that with that too. For one, with talk therapy, that being the more common modality of people getting into therapy and the world of receiving quote unquote help, talk-based therapy, I think the intention was there, right? To hold space for an individual who was looking for some level of support. And you were talking about how like you don't really feel like it helps sometimes for you personally. I relate to that actually, because I've been in talk-based therapy for the last, I'm 27 now, so I've been in and out of therapy for the last 14 years of my life. And actually, no, 15 years. I started therapy when I was 12. So 15 years. And for me, being in mostly talk-based therapy, I thought it was like, cool, like I have no problem talking about my feelings. Like I have no problem just talking about the problem. The problem I started to have was we were only talking about the problem,
right,
instead of any sort of solution. And not that we have to be fixed as human beings, but this is my second point. When I wish we could teach more people like the storytelling structure of the hero's journey. Like I feel like that's such a powerful framework for the human experience that I think we don't talk about enough. Basically, for the listeners and watchers right now, picture your favorite Disney movie. Like every Disney movie is made the same framework: Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And my fiance and I are just watching, what's it? The Princess and the Frog, or I forgot the name of the movie, but it was a Disney movie. And I was literally predicting what was going to happen next because I just studied that framework so much. But there's part of it in Act 1 where the hero, the main character, obviously is casted out from their sense of belonging. And I feel like that casted outness is how a lot of us feel when we experience some level of panic attack or some level of deep trauma. We feel like we are outcasted from the pack. We feel like no one else will get this, right? It's the shame wall. It's only happening to you. And along the path, you meet the sage or the guide. The sage is compared to talk therapy. You want the talk therapist to be the person that offers wisdom. In the storytelling framework, the sage offers a different path, a new path that would help change the current path you were once on. And I feel like sometimes talk-based therapy more so reminds you about the cast outness as opposed to offering a newer path. And there's different modalities, like Sam had said, whether it's play-based therapy, EMDR, which is trauma-based, art therapy. There's all these different ones you can use. But I think talk-based therapy, unfortunately, loses its magic because we're only talking about the old path. We're only talking about the problem itself. We're not talking about carving new neural pathways in our brain, which we have the capacity to do. And that's why I always advocate for students who don't experience help or progress in talk-based therapy. My solution to that, was my third point, was I treat my therapist the way an athlete treats a coach. LeBron James is not going to consistently work on the fact that he has no left hand every single time. This session, he'll work on his left hand. Next session, he'll work on his right hand. Maybe he has a specific shooting coach. Like, if I'm trying to come in this session, I'm not going to sit here and just talk about my problem for the next 44 minutes. I'm going to come in here with a specific intention of I want to work on the ability to be more compassionate to myself. Now, I might not have the answer by the end of the 45-minute session, but that level of intention will help guide the conversation to hopefully find a new path. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't work out over 3, 4, maybe 6+ sessions, then I have to find either a new therapist, someone who has the tools and can offer the help I'm looking for, or find a different modality. I have so many students who I've worked with who've actually thrown the whole idea of therapy away because of one bad specific situation and experience, and that breaks my heart. So I really try to help students take a big, broader view to their healing, as opposed to just talking about their problems, you know?
I love that you bring the hero's journey model. I'm a huge fan of that as well. It's so good. And for anyone listening that's new to the hero's journey model by Joseph Campbell, a great documentary to watch is called Finding Joe. I'll put it in the show notes. It's on YouTube. Finding Joe. It's a documentary breaking down the hero's journey and how you can really apply it to your own life. And there's a lot of spiritual teachers leaving commentary in that documentary, like Deepak Chopra. Anyways, though, all great stuff. This is really good. I'd like to unpack one of the things you brought up towards the end there, in terms of, like, if someone goes to one therapy session and they're like, oh no, that wasn't for me, whatever the modality is, or if someone goes to the same person 5 times, whatever it is, and then they're like, it's not for me. This is one of the most tricky things on the path of healing, because earlier we talked about, like, victim consciousness and victim mindset. So it's easy to convince yourself, because it's uncomfortable, that it's not for you, right? Versus, like, there's other, I know the way you meant it, like with love, was more around like something to jive, right? But also for everyone listening, it's important to know, like, sit with those different thought forms and those different aspects of yourself that are coming through, which is why the reason I love parts work and internal family systems, like getting to know the different parts that make up the totality of your psyche. Think about, like, the movie Inside Out, how there's different parts in the head, right? So when these voices or thoughts start to come through, you're able to discern the difference, being like, wait, am I actually feeling something that's opening me up, or am I putting a wall or a protector up because this is uncomfortable? And that's why I don't like this thing. And this is still something that I'm constantly, like, checking in with myself on, because it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, that's not for me. And then be like, wait, am I just protecting myself here? You know what I mean?
I love that. And that's a great point. It's almost like, and let me know if I'm wrong, is it about what you're saying, giving yourself almost like an escape route if you've experienced some level of adversity or hardness in the working relationship with a therapist. Like if a therapist is asking about your childhood trauma and you're like, I don't want to go there. So you're like, oh, this therapist is not for me, and you give up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's it. Or like for someone doing breath work, like I lead a weekly breath work session on Zoom. It's completely free. And when you're talking about like checking in with your car on a routine basis and how that's similar to therapy, like that's the idea of the Breath Club, where it's like, hey, anytime you need support, we have a free online community, so you can reach out for support, not only from me, but from other people that are learning how to hold space for themselves and others. So you can have that 24/7 access and not have to wait till you have that meeting with your therapist. That said, like with breathwork, last week, someone for the first time came on the call who had never done breathwork before. And she goes, I have to share, like, I didn't like that. Like at first, like I noticed, like, I didn't like that. Is that normal? Like by the end, I liked it, but there are some parts that I didn't like, and we're all like, yeah, no. That's the thing with breath work. Like the joke is with breath work, it's called work because it is work. There's so many different types of breath work. There's a lot of grounding breath work exercises. That's what most people would know. But the more activating stuff is going to bring thoughts, feelings, or repressed memories up to the surface so that you can move through it. And not only is it uncomfortable physically because it's physical work to go inhale and exhale through your mouth, but also it's uncomfortable with everything that's coming to the surface. So I do know people specifically like with breath work in this example that have been like, nope, breath work's not for me. I'm like, all right, is it that not for you though? And same thing with your example of like wanting to get to like say a childhood traumatic experience and being like, I'm not going backwards, I'm going forwards. There's also those people, which I know when we talked about this earlier, it's like you and I aren't of the belief of like we want to wallow in our stuff from in the past, but if there's something that's unresolved, then it does need to be addressed.
100%. And that's where when you were talking about the young lady who was in the breath club, breath club, right? Breath club. In the breath club, I feel like what it sounds like is she probably doesn't understand, and many people have this too, that you're kind of stuck in this subconscious pattern. And what you're offering through breath work is a disruption of that pattern. Mm-hmm. And the reason why most people retract from it is it's like, you're attracting the pattern that I've done for years. Why would I want to mess this up? Why do I want to mix this all up? It's no different than like, again, this is a very simplistic example. If you wake up for the last 20 years and every single day, hopefully every single day, you woke up and walked 5 steps to get to your kitchen sink to brush your teeth, that's a pattern, right? That's a pattern. And now what you're offering through breathwork is disrupting the 5 steps that you would take from your bed to your bathroom to brush your teeth. Any human being, when it comes to pattern disruption, is gonna freaking hate it. They're gonna be like, what are you talking about? But you're right, it's necessary. And just because it's foreign doesn't mean it's a failure. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. It could be good. I think people, though, they need some level of a North Star to look towards, right? Something that they want. I mean, going back to the hero's journey, there is that objective that every hero wants. Right? In The Lion King, I mean, unfortunately, Simba had to learn through loss and grief that he was always meant to fulfill his dad's biggest shoes. I mean, become king of the rock. Like, you have to have some level of North Star you're aiming towards. And I feel like self-actualization sometimes gets too much lost in the woo-woo and it sounds too philosophical. But I think where some therapists, a lot of therapists go wrong, they kind of ask the client or the person who's coming for help, well, what's your goal here? What do you want to work towards? That question is not really asked enough to a point where it helps the client understand where we are working towards something. Because the pattern disruption is going to be painful. You're going to freaking hate it. You're going to want to quit it. But let's remind ourselves what we're working towards, right? And that's what I would hope to help more students understand is when you experience these disruptions in your pattern, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's necessary.
So much to highlight there, and yeah, having a focus, something that you're working on. I think that's a really big part, and maybe we'll come back and revisit that if we have time. But there's one thing you said there about the Lion King, and like I just go towards the shadow work. That's just kind of the threads I usually pull at. But like the Lion King, where you mentioned like Simba losing his dad. Shoot, what was it? Mufasa, right? Yeah, Mufasa, and going through grief, and that's what propelled him on this journey, and really to become the king, the lion that he was meant to become. And I think that is so important for us to highlight here, because that's been a through line in this conversation of these hardships that we go through. Like if we get stuck in them and we just look at them at the hardship, then what happens? We get stuck. If we don't allow ourselves to feel it and go through that grief, then we bypass it, we repress it, and then it's going to come back at some point. But when we lean in, that's where the real power and the magic is. So I was so happy that you brought that up, because that's just such a great way to look at it for sure.
Yeah, and I also think too, to that point, like when we have these emotions that we don't want and these feelings that are very intense to face, it makes total sense why we want to resist it, right? It's painful. No, human beings don't want to experience pain. We want to avoid it at all costs. The thing I always talk to about as well is when you resist it, not only does it persist, but you're robbing yourself of an opportunity to build self-awareness, right? You're foregoing the chance to actually become more self-aware. Imagine, using the Lion King example, if Simba never, just like when he saw his dad's reflection in the pond or in the river, saying like, speaking like life into him and saying like, I want you to go on this path, and Simba just was like, nah, I'm good, and he just like he runs away. He continues to be an outcast. Like that the whole story would have ended in the first 40 minutes of the whole movie.
And we can pause right there, because many people are having aha moments right now just listening to this right now, because you're starting to realize how that's been some of your patterns that have kept you stuck in the past. And once you realize that, instead of spiraling into shame and guilt, you celebrate that, because now you just built the awareness around that, so you can respond consciously and intentionally versus subconsciously react and numb, avoid, and distract.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm excited for that. That gets me excited when I can see people start to transform and start to like form these new neural pathways, as I call them, and they start to see that, okay, I was in this pattern that no longer is serving me. So then how can I be open to building a new pattern or a new path? That makes me happy. So if that is you listening to this right now, I'm grateful that you're listening. I'm grateful that you're still here. And I wish you all the best on your path, because you're on it. And I really do believe at the end of it, you'll become a better person.
If you're looking for a powerful and transformative experience for your next event, consider bringing in Sam Kabert as a keynote speaker. Sam's message of soul life balance and his expertise in mental health and mindfulness resonate deeply with audiences. He not only inspires with his story, but also offers practical tools like breathwork to help attendees regulate their emotions and reconnect with themselves. You can even have Sam lead a guided breathwork journey, creating a truly unforgettable experience. To learn more or book Sam for your event, check out the link in the show notes to book a call with Sam now.
Yeah, and probably just starting to wrap it up here with a couple final topics that I've been meaning to circle back on. One is familiar and known states versus going into the unknown, and we could probably talk about that in relation to like inner child healing. And here's the thing, Wes said something earlier, it was probably like 20-30 minutes ago, that I've been waiting to just bring back in, because it's so huge. Like these chaotic states that we have, for many of us, that is our norm. That is our known state. So when things start to feel quote unquote normal, or things are in flow, things are going good, or it's starting to feel like easy, it's almost like, wait, this isn't right. So then we subconsciously self-sabotage to get us back into that chaotic state. Like, the understanding this is so huge, everyone listening. Like, this was a big one for me. It was just a big one for my dad recently. He heard me say something I don't remember, and he's like, wait, what were you saying? So I had to explain to him. And sometimes you probably feel this too, Wes, like being so entrenched in this kind of work, you forget what some of these mindset shifts, how big they can be, you know?
Yeah. Huge. They're huge shifts. And you're right. When you're so close to it, you're like, oh yeah, that did happen. And I did have that shift. And it's interesting seeing someone else have that shift, because it reminds you of, oh, this work really does matter. But I loved it. I love the work that we do, because we get a chance to hold space for other people. I mean, with your dad, I can imagine it was probably a big shift for him. Right?
Yeah, we brought up later. Yeah, so just to recap that, it's like, if we start to find that we're blowing things up when things are going quote unquote good or smooth or they're flowing, it's likely what we were talking about earlier with pattern interruptions. And it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right, so let me get back to my known state, my normal state, which is actually the chaotic state. And then again, we just celebrate that. We just built moment to moment awareness, so now we can respond. So that was one thing. The other thing is inner child healing. Talk to us a little bit about how you came across inner child work and how transformational that's been for you.
Yeah, great question, man. I've been always thinking about how I'm a visual thinker. So one of the things that I started to visualize, this was about 2 years ago, was I had this very much of an image that I was in this hallway of this Museum of Fine Arts. In this hallway of Museum of Fine Arts, there was me in the middle, and there was this long hallway. On the left side of the hallway was a framed photo of me, my wife, our 5 kids sitting around a campfire. And then on the other side of the hallway, on the right side of the hallway, there's a kind of darker photo of a young boy who's naked in this red room on sleeping bags, and he's crying. And both are me, right? Both are me. And I go by Wes. My full name is Wesley. I was started to go by Wes in high school because the Wes Woodson had a ring to it, and I liked it. And people always ask, is it my stage name? But it's not. No, it's my nickname. But I just cut my full name kind of short. But in the photo to my right, the boy who's on the sleeping bags crying, that's me. That's Wesley. And Wesley experienced a lot of things in his childhood that were something that I kept secret for a very long time. I was touched. I was sexually assaulted when I was a kid. I had a lot of sexual exploration when I was a young boy that kind of confused my sexual identity when I got older. So it made me feel like when I was at the intersection of me being in a relationship with my now fiance, who I saw in the left picture, right? In the picture with our 5 kids on a campfire, it made me feel like, oh, I can't have that if that's where I came from. Like, Wes is this distant character, but Wesley, he's like this boy who I just feel so ashamed of. And where those two things were in existence, I remember for me, I self-sabotaged my current relationship. I really self-sabotaged because I was really believing that my inner child, I felt so ashamed of him. I didn't want to be anywhere near him. And more importantly, I didn't think I had the potential to achieve the other photo. So what I had to realize is the healing that came to, I had to not only go back to that young boy and give him a hug, but I also had to open the door for my fiance to be like, this is who I am. If it was like the frame of that photo, I hid that photo from the world. I didn't want anyone to know about it. But me taking the courage and the bravery to be like, that is me, and that's me too, and this is me now, and both exist. That's where I started to come in. I'm still going back to that photo. I'm still trying every single day to disrupt those patterns that boy had of thinking like, how am I gonna be married to a woman if a boy touched me when I was younger? What does that mean for me now? Like, all these disruptive thoughts, those are patterns that were ingrained in my head at a very formative age. So I'm like, how am I going to go back in that room daily? I'm talking about, Sam, it's a daily practice of disrupt that pattern of my thinking so I don't self-sabotage, right? And another half that I do too with the inner child work is I talk about this actively with my partner, with a therapist. So even talking about it disrupts the pattern, because the former pattern was shame, embarrassment, guilt, hatred, disgust, all these negative words that I associated to my inner child, my sense of self. I was like, okay, let's start to disrupt that pattern by talking about it. Because when you talk about it, well, you experience empathy. And empathy is like that silver bullet that starts to break down that shame wall. So that's where I am today, at this place of learning how to accept younger Wesley and give him that hug, and bring my fiance and future wife in about a year into that photo with me and see like this is who Wesley is.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, brother. I appreciate your vulnerability, your honesty, and your transparency. And, you know, for all of us listening, inner child work can be so profound. And yes, you can absolutely work with some sort of therapist and some sort of modality, but kind of like how Wes just walked us through it, like sometimes you can just take a pause for yourself and just really dive into yourself, because it can be so easy to outsource and think we need someone else to quote unquote fix us, which we didn't get into fix that energy, or guide us through a process. One thing I'll share is there was a modality, I forget what it was, but I had like someone I was working with that was doing some rewiring type stuff and some hypnosis, and she'd walk me through a visualization of like meeting my 5-year-old self, and then she'd like walk through like, where's his happy place. You mentioned playing basketball earlier before we hit record, and for me it was like playing basketball. So, and she just had me like place him in my heart playing basketball, knowing that he's always there. And it was just like, wow, that's so cool. So one of the practices I do for myself now is like, sometimes when a part comes up or something else, whatever it is, I just walk through that process on my own and be like, okay, I'm going to place you in my heart. So just important for us to know too, like as much as it's important to soak up all the information and learn more too, it's also about like getting rid of a lot of the inputs so that you can really come to those answers for yourself and guide yourself back home. You know?
Yeah, there can't be so many chefs in the kitchen, right?
Yeah,
You gotta realize that you're the one that has the ability to toss it and sauce it. Yeah, you're the one that can do it. And I love that, because you're giving the person on the other end of who's hearing this agency, right? And I think sometimes when we get help and we outsource, we sometimes release our own sense of agency, which then keeps us stuck. But I love that. I love that you're right. You can really kind of come back to yourself and do some of this work on your own. One of the frameworks I use is I constantly remind myself, it's a gratitude practice, but it's reminding myself the mantra of today's reality was once yesterday's prayer. And I love that, because it's like, I think that boy in that room in the red room with the sleeping bags, that boy would lose his shit at who I am now. Like, he would be like, what? Bro, we're in Texas. We're about to get married. Like, we have our own business. We travel around the country, sharing our own story. Like, what? Like, he would lose his stuff. And I just, damn, that's like emotional. But like, I think you'd be so proud of me. And I aspire to make him proud. And I really believe that I am making him proud, because that one exercise gives me so much energy. Like, that is my caffeine. Like, caffeine, man, and I love it. So I encourage people to ask themselves that question: what is something you have today, both relationally, spiritually, emotionally, that you once prayed for in the past? I think you'll find something.
That's a great prompt. Thank you for sharing that. That's an amazing way to close it out. And I just love your enthusiasm. It's so contagious. That's awesome. And we'll definitely be doing more of these podcasts. So you have your book, I Have Anxiety, So What? You're on tour, and your new podcast. What's the name of your new podcast?
My new podcast is called I Have Anxiety. Thanks for asking. And it is all about trying to help people feel more seen, heard, and understood in the mental health conversation. It's really about trying to have those conversations to create connection about the things that we felt so disconnected in. When it comes to anxiety, loneliness, suicidal ideation, depression, we want to talk about it on our platform. So definitely come check it out. It's on I Have Anxiety. Thanks for asking. Anywhere you get podcasts.
Amazing. So you guys can find the link to the Spotify podcast, I Have Anxiety, the link to Wes's book, and everything that we talked about all in the show notes. So thank you so much, Wes, for taking the time to be with us here on the Soul Seeker Show. And I'm sure we'll talk again real soon.
Yes, we will.
Thank you so much for listening to the end. I hope you got so much out of this podcast. Make sure to check the show notes. That's where all the links that we mentioned in this episode are. You can find the link to the Finding Joe documentary about the hero's journey, the link to Wes's podcast and his book, and so much more. Thank you again for checking out this episode of the Soul Seeker podcast, and I will see you on the next episode of the Soul Seeker podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the very end. I hope you dug this podcast just as much as I enjoyed it. If you got anything at all, please, if you could just do me a favor and leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast, it helps the show grow. So thank you for considering to leave a review. If you want to go deeper with Soltara or Elan, you can find the links to connect with them in the show notes. And if you want to work with me, the best way to work with me, the easiest way to work with me is the free way, and that's by joining the Breath Club. The link to the Breath Club is in the show notes. And also know that I'm available for one-on-one support, that is coaching and guidance, as well as keynotes and breathwork journeys for conferences and events. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next episode of The Soul Seeker.